Hi, Mari. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I
Yeah.
always enjoy chit-chatting, and especially with people I like. So let's see, what juiciness are we going to get into?
Yes, I love chatting with you so much. So let's begin with all about you. Like, who are you and what do you do? What do you bring into this beautiful world?
I bring integration. The same way that consultants bring technological integration to all the massive projects at work, or a construction company brings integration to your vision, I bring integration to your psychological, spiritual, and womanly intuition. Because it almost feels like these three gateways, our mind, our heart, and our womb, can run wild if we don't tame them and integrate them. So I would say if there's anything anyone takes away from this, it's that it is necessary to integrate what your mind is telling you with what your heart is feeling and with what your womb, aka your sex organs as well, are desiring. And so that is the kind of work that has led me to create Creative Healing by Mari Vega. And that's how we all met. I was joining a phenomenal networking business crew that we're a part of. And I got to meet you and got to network with so many women as I was building out my brand. And the goal there is really just, I do Reiki services, I do online circles, and I had all of these voice memos that were flowing through me. And long and behold, I found you and you made it into a podcast for me. And so now I'm also a podcaster of Doing the Work, a podcast that helps guide you as you begin to do that alignment work and integration work with yourself.
Yes. And I needed your messages. I think when you sent them to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is what I need to hear. And I love how they're just quick and right to the point, and this is what you need to hear and done. There's like no fluff. Like you're just like, this is it.
People don't have the attention span for it, I think. And then that's like a disservice. I think once you do have the attention span and you know who you want to learn about and you're down to spend an hour listening to this person teach you something, like that's great. But I'm here trying to get the people who can't imagine sitting down for an hour. So I'm like, listen, my podcast is 5 minutes long. You can give me 5 minutes. And so when I also heard and got to experience myself, which was really nice, because the way everything worked out for those tuning in is, Jillian was starting her podcasting business and we were in this networking group. And so it just made complete sense to work together to birth this baby that I didn't know I had. Because for me, those downloads were things that I recorded during my own spiritual awakening. So I also didn't really know what I said in them. So it was kind of like this faith, like I'm going to give these voice memos over to somebody and hope that I don't sound crazy or that I'm like saying wild things. And if I am, well, she will let me know. So it's been a wild ride, just having that trust in your voice, like to literally give it to you and have you put it out to the world. And I can't edit. Like I can edit. I can. But I mean, like, we edit ourselves too often, too much. And that is the real gift of having, that relationship with someone like you, to kind of take away that desire to be perfect. And in that, take away from that divine guidance that needed to flow through in that way.
Mm-hmm. I find that with a lot of my clients. They're always like, did this sound okay? What do you think of this? And really, my job is just to reassure them that, this is your message. It needs to go out. So it's not perfect, it's not, but that's the whole thing. Just say it, get it out of you, and you'll feel better, and people will connect with you over that. It's
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Because you know what? I think many of us forget that our inner self like can be trusted. Like our inner self can be our guide. Like our inner self can be our like dope ass guru who is going to get you through everything because they've been there since the day you were born inside of you. And it's just like a matter of building that relationship and that trust where you don't have to know what you said because you're in alignment. And so whatever you say is flowing, and when you record it or think you have to know what you're saying or think you have to prepare it, like that's the ego. The ego wants to know the story. The ego wants to make meaning before anyone else knows about stuff. So you're actually intersecting the ego when you do the kind of work that you do. So props to you, because you're all here like, yeah, I bring these podcasts to earth, but really you're a vital piece of that integration of like, yeah, but don't get in your own way, like let me bring it to earth for you.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And yeah, I'm always saying,
You
don't script them. Like you can have some notes, some highlights that you want to make sure you touch on, but don't script it. Just go with what comes, because you'll say what you need to say in that moment.
right. And trusting in that moment, because I know that there's times where there's some podcast episodes that I listen to and I'm like, that could have been better. And then 2 weeks from now, I listen to it again and I'm like in a different vibe. Maybe I was PMSing when I judged myself. And now I'm in like my ovulation and inner spring. And I'm like, yes, like I feel great. And I hear the same episode and it just hits different. So I think it's also like where we're at. And I know
Yes.
we've talked about our cycles. So I don't know if like for the listener's sake, we should just touch on that real quick so that they
Oh,
understand what
yeah.
we're talking about.
Yeah, go ahead if you want to get. I love talking about the menstrual cycle. It's how I run my life and business. So go
How
for
long
it.
have you been doing it that way?
I got into it, was it 2019? I think it was when I first heard about it. And then I started devouring every book and everything I could read about it because I'm like, this makes so much sense.
How did it enter your world? I'm always fascinated with how this knowledge reaches women.
I saw it on somebody's Instagram. I don't even remember whose. I just saw they posted something about it and how I didn't even know we had 4 different phases. I thought it was really, you just bled. That was it. I was told you bled and you have to deal with it. There's cramps, there's PMS, there's bloating, and you can't do anything about it. And you just have to deal with it unless you go on birth control. Like that was my knowledge of the menstrual cycle.
Absolutely. And that's most of us knowledge, and not only knowledge, but I don't know about you, but for many women, even getting their period is something that doesn't come with a training manual. It's like dependent on who was there the day it happened. And it's very much like in the air. And I know a lot of women in our circle who are very committed to changing that and committed to really like being in touch with like every single 7 to 9 year old girl in the world and being like, FYI, this is the next season of your life that's coming. And this is how it's going to be so cool. And this is how it's going to be your magical power. And so that is the introduction I want to give to managing your life around your cycle. I found it when I just knew I had this deep knowing in my heart that I didn't want to be on birth control. But for me, having had it terminated a pregnancy that I didn't want when I was 16 years old, Planned Parenthood told me, well, you have to go on birth control because like, look what you did. Like, don't dare do this again. And there was like this huge shame around what happened. And ultimately, it landed me going on orthotricycline low for like the rest of my life until I was like 27 when I got off of it because I wanted to have a baby. And so I thought it would take forever because I thought like if you're on birth control for a long time, it takes a long time to get it out of your system, I guess. But I got pregnant within 2 months. And I was like, whoa, I wanted a kid, but whoa, I thought it would take longer. So there goes the journey of like going into motherhood and the hormonal changes and the breastfeeding. And I want to bring this up because when you breastfeed, you get put on a different birth control, and that birth control doesn't have hormones. So it was the first time that I even learned you could be on birth control without hormones. But that's because for breastfeeding mothers, they need different things. And the point is, it's called the mini pill. And so I was taking this pill, and then I went through all these hormonal crazy experiences when I was done breastfeeding. And that's because when you're done breastfeeding, your hormones go crazy for about 3 to 6 months. They actually won't even test you hormonally if you had just finished breastfeeding because you have to wait. So I was waiting those 6 months and I got pregnant again because we were going to be open to trying for our second. So I never really got that hormone test. So fast forward, now I have my second kid, back to wrapping up the breastfeeding, back to whether or not, I want to get an IUD or like all these things. And it just didn't feel right for me. It just didn't feel like I wanted to do this incision where you bleed and it hurts. And then like you have a thing inside your body. And I was like, what other option do I have? luckily I know all these amazing midwives, and they were like, bitch, Matt Easy, natural family planning. Have you ever heard of it? And I was like, what is that? Natural family planning is when you just learn when you're ovulating and you just avoid the acts that will get you pregnant during the time frame that you're ovulating. And it's not even that much. And I was like, no way. How do I tell my husband this? And long story short, it really just teaches you the scientific part and understanding when you're ovulating, when you're pre-ovulation, then ovulation, and then luteal phase, where your body's like, are we pregnant? Are we not? And then it goes into, okay, let's have a bleed. And so we're in this constant cycle where our body goes through so many different hormonal needs. And so when you align it to the moon, or you align it to this idea of the seasons, cyclical, like Mother Earth, then it's easier to understand. So I'll just explain it like that. Like in winter, what do we do as a society? We go inward. We stay in our homes, we cozy up, we get the cozy sweater and the slippers, and we like put on a fire and we watch movies. Like that's what people do in winter. Like they don't go out. There's people that go outside. Yes. For those that like to do all the snow stuff, cool.
Not me.
But as a society, right? And so also think about the trees. Like in winter, the trees are bare. They have nothing on them. They're just bearing the intensity of the climate. And that's what I think is what's happening with quote unquote bad periods, is that you're bearing the intensity of living a life not in alignment with your cycle. Like it is intense and it is painful and it is horrible. And that is why you're living that way, because you're not living in alignment and integration with your life. Next comes inner spring, which is that time after you bleed. It's that next week. It's like pre-ovulation. Your body is getting ready to create an egg. And it's also energetically already bearing fruit, right? In spring, you start to see the little pieces of grass start to appear. You see some trees start to have leaves, but not all of them. That's because we're all on a different pace. And it's also a reflection of how healthy your body is. And that is called the inner spring. And inner summer, it's like summer, everybody wants to be out. There's always a happy hour. There's always events. People travel, vacation time. That is ovulation week. That is also when you're going to feel very excited to be out and about. Your body's like, let's get pregnant. I have an egg in my oven. And energetically, you can use that to socialize and to call in, especially if you're running a business, all the right conversations and scheduling all the interviews and having back-to-back calls with potential clients. And that's the week you probably need to avoid intimacy with your husband in a manner that would lead to pregnancy. And that is what would stop me. I was like, first of all, I never really am even in the mood, because that happens with birth control. And then when you're in the mood, you're telling me I can't, connect with my husband that way. That's where you lean on all the other intimacy models that you knew about before you were introduced to the home run, AKA the sexual act, right? The kissing, the hugging, the holding hands, the other things you can explore about your partner that aren't just that penetrative act. And that, I remember the first time someone told me that would change my life, that intimacy would expand my marriage, and it absolutely did. So to anyone listening thinking like there's no way, I trust and believe, like my husband is Dominican, like Latino man, like there is a stigma out there, like if you ain't giving it to your man, somebody else is, like all that stuff is irrelevant, because it's really about the intimate connection we have with each other. And then that leads you to, when you do bleed, that is day one. Now you're back to, we missed the PMS period. The PMS period is inner autumn. And inner autumn is when it's time to, the leaves are falling, right? So the masks are falling from your face. And so now you can't pretend to be happy because you're pissed, and you feel it all over your body, and your phase is also going to trigger you. So I love that we got to talk about this, because that's how it leads to your next bleed. And whether or not you honored any of those phases is whether or not you're going to have a happy blood or a really angry blood that is going to make you go through it a lot. So I know that was very long. Any questions, or did I do a good job?
You did a great job. Yes. Yes. And that's exactly how I run my business too. Like this interview is being done, I'm in my ovulation phase because I have more energy. Like I block off my schedule for my menstrual phase week because you don't want to talk to me during that week. I don't have the energy to really like my brain doesn't function as well as it does. But understanding that has allowed me to use my energy as I need in my business. I know when to schedule the calls to that I'm going to be able to get a ton of work done. And then I know when to rest and hold back and give myself that time to recoup and recharge.
I love to hear you say that the energy is so important, because once you learn how to navigate your own energy, you stop feeling so depleted, right? So I'm sure that when you started aligning it that way, it just gives you this understanding that you don't need that much caffeine at 2:00, or you don't need all these things to pull through, because you understand why you're in the situation you're in. You understand why you feel the way you feel. And that is, I think, the icing on top is, how many times do we say, I don't know why I feel so sad today. I don't know why I feel so depressed. I don't know why today I feel, and it leads to feeling crazy. There was a time in my life, multiple times I've gone to my therapist and been like, are you sure I'm not bipolar? Like, are you sure?
Yes.
And she's like, I am sure. And I'm like, what am I dealing with then? And it's honestly just lack of integrating your understanding of your cycle with how you live your life and how you run your business if you are a small business owner.
So I would love for you to, if you can, give some tips on how, if somebody wants to start getting started connecting with their cycle, like what's step one? Like what should they start doing?
Yeah, step one is you definitely don't have to get off birth control right away if you're uncomfortable. Like I started learning about my cycle and starting to act like, with the guidance given to me about what to do each cycle while I was still on birth control. And to be clear, there are many instances where birth control is necessary. I am not here shaming anyone's decision around their reproductive rights. What I am here to do is tell you that in the long term, turning off an entire major system of your body is a detriment to you. Because if you are a Mustang, but you never actually use 100% of your engine, you will never actually perform like a Mustang. So I think that's pretty freaking clear. Shout out to those who are able to function at like 95%. I'm assuring you that extra 5% is going to change your life. So I want to be really clear that like we are onto something that is life-changing. We both know it. And for anyone listening to this for the first time, I know that either of us would walk you through it personally, one-on-one. So don't think that you can't reach out whatever time you're listening to this podcast. But the first step would really just be if you're even bleeding. And I have my son, for those who are catching this little 3-year-old coughing. So many of us sometimes don't even have a consistent bleed, or we're not bleeding, or maybe we're pregnant, or maybe we're even menopausal. But all of the things that you can begin to do are just also connecting with the moon. So the moon cycle helps us understand also energetically how our body is feeling. And so there's a lot of history around the connection between the moon and the womb. I won't pretend to know all about it. But I will say that you can even start with pretending that you bleed with the new moon, or pretending that you bleed with the full moon, and having that be your like day one of your bleed, and following. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
And following the cycles of what to do during that time frame. So for anyone listening, if you're going to choose that it's the full moon or the new moon, choose that as your day one of your bleed. If you do bleed, then choose, start with day one of your bleed. The first thing you need to do is you have to honor the first 24 hours of your bleed. You have to. Choosing not to is choosing to have a painful period, is choosing to have PMS. So you need to take radical responsibility that you are in control of your life. And that means putting the boundaries that helps you take care of yourself and your needs. And for many of us, that is not something we're ready to do. So I won't even go into the rest of it, because first, it's really that boundary. And I know that it's difficult. And I would say, like, you have to learn what a full body fuck yes means in order to actually understand the difference. So if you're not ready for it, forcing it is also not ideal. But also, we can just learn to do less and just be a human being. I know I have a whole episode on just being a human being, but the idea there is start by doing less. So just by doing what needs to be done and making sure that you honor your body every day in the smallest of ways. Like, do you rush through brushing your teeth, or do you look in the mirror and say something lovely to yourself this morning? Do you rush through the shower and putting on lotion? Do you even put on lotion? Like, it starts in the little ways, because when we take care of ourselves on the outside, taking care of ourselves on the inside becomes a no-brainer. So I'll leave it there, because if anyone is really into this, it is so much more of like a engaged conversation based on what your reality is. Like, if you're fighting endometriosis, PCOS, facing infertility, you don't want to hear it this way. We're going to want to get really particular about what's going on in your life. What are you eating during your cycle? What do you already know about yourself versus not? So I'm going to, for the sake of your audience and getting through the podcast episode, I'll leave it there. But if there's anything you wanted to add about what would you suggest for someone who wants to start their journey living cyclically?
I would say tracking for me was my first step. Like, I would say, so write down day 1, which is the first day that you bleed, and just how I felt that day. And I tracked for about 3 months when I started to see a pattern. I'm like, wow, day 25, like, that's a low day for me. Like, I have no energy on day 25. So then seeing that pattern, I'm able to really pinpoint my schedule of, okay, day 25 is a no-go for me, like no strenuous activity. There will be no calls. Like, it's a lower day. So just tracking the scene, you're probably going to see a pattern of how you're feeling each day of your cycle.
Absolutely. And for me, that's day 22. Day 22 is that shift from my summer to autumn, and it usually slaps me in the face. Like, I go from, I'm the best person in the world, I'm on top of the world, I am so smart, I am everything. And then I'll just be chilling there, and some thought will come into my head like, you can't do this. What are you thinking? Give up on everything. And I'm like, all right, hi, inner autumn, I see you. I'm going to give you some love. And then I make some time for some extra meditation, maybe like a heart chakra opener meditation to just open up my heart more, be more compassionate with myself. And like you said, start clearing out my calendar, start blocking time so that I can just begin to fill myself with what I need. And I actually offer an entire freebie on YouTube. I have a womb-based business video there, and it walks you through journal prompts and ideas and things to do during the cycles, and actually shows you 3 practices that you can do at the end to honor different phases of your cycle. And it starts with a nice little embodiment practice, which is like landing energetically in your body, knowing what hurts and why it hurts, and letting your body explain to you what it needs. So I regularly get foot massages because foot reflexology really releases me. I regularly go to, like, once every 6 weeks to 10 weeks, I'll go to like a sweat and a sweat spa where you sweat and then go like in the cold plunges and stuff. Just like releasing my body of all the toxins, just like the kind of life we live in the world where we're living. There's so much we're taking in and consuming. So there's all these like more intricate ways that I self-care, but sometimes just learning how to land in your body is the only self-care that you could start with that will really make a difference in your life.
Oh, yes. I will make sure that link for YouTube is in the show notes, but I'm going to wrap this up now because I know you have a sick little boy on your lap. So because I know people are going to want to connect with you and be in your energy. I swear, just being in your energy is like lifts me up. So where can they find you?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Well, people can learn all about me on my website, marivega.me. And on there, the thing that I'm most passionate about these days is I've created and founded a school called the WOMBan School. Woman spelled like womb, WOMBAN, woman. And the reason I mentioned that is because I am already accepting a wait list for our April 2023 launch, because I have about 24 students in the program right now, and we're only 6 weeks in, and the massive life-changing experiences from either pregnancies that of people who are having fertility issues, or even assisting in what can look like a miscarriage at the beginning, but properly connecting with your body and working with your body to process that, to women who are like standing up in their marriages, to women who are getting divorced and finally like standing up for themselves, like the impact, people who are leaving their jobs and just taking sabbaticals and taking care of themselves. Like, it is so liberating to know that you have a tribe of women who know that by honoring your womb and stepping into all of those shadow selves within us, we can unlock and tap into so much more power. So for anyone who feels like I need more of this, there's a lot more coming, because this is my first year running the school. But trust me, like, this women's school is going to be next to every Planned Parenthood in the world, because that is what I needed. I didn't need to be put on birth control. I needed to learn how to navigate my Mustang. Okay. So if anyone wants to learn more about that, there's a wait list going on there. And I offer monthly circles to let people kind of understand what you touched on, my energy, right? I give a lot. So I feel myself a lot. And I give on these monthly healing circles. So again, they'll find everything on my website, marivega.me. And yeah, they can tune into Doing the Work podcast in the meantime to have these 5-minute snippets to motivate them to keep going on the hard days.
Yes, there's nothing I love more than women supporting women and helping them grow. And just, yes, and go listen to her podcast. It is amazing. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.